Bene, grazie a tutti. Cominciamo questa lezione che, come anticipato, ha come ospite David Adamo e Giulia Passerini. Vado a introdurveli brevemente. Intanto vorrei ringraziare il Dipartimento Culture e Civiltà che ha contribuito a rendere possibile questa mattina, e in particolare il professor Valerio Terraroli, Monica Molteni. Ringrazio anche la Commissione Contemporanea di Ateneo, che sapete lavora trasversalmente alle discipline e ha patrocinato questo talk che verrà registrato e reso disponibile sul sito di Contemporanea dell'Università di Verona. Ringrazio tutti quanti voi, in parte siete appunto gli studenti del corso di Laurea Magistrale e in parte è un incontro aperto al pubblico. I'm going to introduce you in Italian, just to be faster a little bit, and then we continue in English, okay? Thank you. Dicevo che oggi abbiamo come ospite David Adamo e l'occasione è l'opening 2 giorni fa della mostra Strange Attractors, The Anthology of Interplanetary Folk Art, volume 3, Lost in Space, che è una collettiva curata da Bob Nickas, curatore di New York, già iniziata diversi anni fa, questo appunto è il 3° episodio, e ha inaugurato sabato alla Galleria Palazzo di Brescia e vedeva tra gli artisti partecipanti David, quindi questa è l'occasione per cui si trova in Italia. Normalmente vive a Berlino, in particolare vive a Berlino dal 2008, è nato a Rochester, New York, nel 1979, ha al suo attivo molte mostre personali, tra le gallerie con cui collabora e dove ha tenuto personale ricordo la Peter Freeman di New York, la White Space di Miami Beach, The Murders Collection di West Palm Beach, l'Ibit Gallery di Londra e Los Angeles, Albright Knox Art Gallery di Buffalo, la Rodolfo Janssen di Bruxelles, Mendelswood Gallery di San Paolo del Brasile e la Kunsthalle di Fribourg. Tra le collettive invece in cui ha partecipato ricordiamo soltanto alcune, come il Museo Van Buren di Bruxelles, il Bass Museum di Miami Beach in Florida, The AGI Contemporary Art Museum di Richfield in Connecticut, il Museo d'Arte di Rio de Janeiro, il Denver Art Museum, il KW Institute for Contemporary Art di Berlino e la Bergen Kunsthalle in Norvegia. Nel 2015 gli è stata dedicata una mostra personale dal Museo di Arte Contemporanea di Lima, in Perù, e nel 2010 ha partecipato alla collettiva Greater New York al MoMA PS1. Lo stesso anno ha esposto alla Biennale del Whitney Museum, sempre di New York. Nel 2011, ne parleremo anche oggi in questa lezione, ha partecipato a questo progetto nella Basilica di Santa Maria Maggiore di Bergamo, All in Good Time, Chapter 3, una doppia personale insieme a Ettore Favini. Benvenuto, welcome David, thank you for accepting the invitation. Giulia Passerini, la dottoressa Passerini che è qui con me oggi, la ringrazio. Il professor Tognutti non è potuto essere presente per ragioni di impegni di lavoro, però tenevo a introdurli entrambi. Sono dei colleghi, degli amici con cui abbiamo condiviso negli anni passati questo percorso di studio delle collezioni AGI Verona in Santa Marta. In particolare la dottoressa Passerini è una restauratrice, si è focalizzata nel corso dei suoi studi all'Accademia di Belle Arti di Verona sul restauro dell'arte contemporanea, svolgendo una tesi sul restauro del contemporaneo in rapporto proprio agli artisti viventi e quindi la strategia conservativa attraverso le fonti indirette come per esempio l'intervista d'artista. Durante questi 2, forse 3 anni anche passati ha svolto attività di tutoraggio come assistente del professor Tognutti per il monitoraggio delle opere esposte. Alcuni di voi l'hanno già conosciuta e hanno partecipato a queste sessioni di manutenzione. La ringrazio per aver accettato l'invito perché è qui infatti come professionista, visto che l'abbiamo anche strappata al suo lavoro in cantiere, per aiutarci a discutere e ad analizzare alcune problematiche anche che hanno attinenza con il nostro lavoro di studiosi per la parte che riguarda gli allestimenti, per esempio, come un'opera d'arte si espone, si fruisce, si conserva o come se ne permette la preservazione nel tempo, che sono di solito questioni che non vengono, diciamo, affrontate dagli artisti stessi, che vanno un altro tipo di lavoro. Il nostro lavoro ha invece attinenza con lo studio, la valorizzazione e la conservazione. Per questo appunto sono felice di questa presenza, perché ci permetterà di iniziare questo dibattito, al quale siete invitati naturalmente a partecipare. La forma del talk appunto è una chiacchierata, quindi si parlerà tra noi, e quello che vi propongo come formula è che noi adesso procediamo con una serie di immagini, anche di video che ci ha proposto lo stesso David, e inizieremo a imbastire un dialogo. Siete invitati a partecipare, magari potenzialmente nel corso della seconda parte di questa lezione, se volete annotarvi delle domande, delle cose che vi vengono in mente. Una volta che abbiamo, tra virgolette, finito di introdurre le opere e di parlarne, potete tranquillamente intervenire prenotandovi, alzando la mano rispetto alle cose che vi siete annotati. So, the introduction has finished. I think I didn't forget anything, I think. Otherwise, we will see in the course of. Giulia, sei a posto? Vuoi venire più in qua? Bene. To start, we will show a very short clip video that David provided to us. It's interesting because it's a visit to the studio of David, who is placed in Berlin. And this is also the occasion of this talk, because we met in September in the same studio, and I had almost the same visit, not so complete like the video, but in a sense, we started to talk in September there. David, would you like that I stop when you tell me when we start to talk?
Can I control it, actually? Is it
Please,
possible?
go for it. Please.
Because I can
It's
just...
Thank you very much.
It's okay,
Yeah.
volume-wise? You can hear me? Okay. So, originally I made this video to do a talk about time, or time-based art, and to a group of students at Parsons University in New York. And the reason why I chose to do my studio, because I find that there's a lot of evidence of how I work with time. And so I start off the video with the picture of my door to my studio. And just over the last 12 years that I've been in the studio, every day I come and I leave a handprint unintentionally. And I like that when I come to the studio, it's already like a work of art, which is this trace of my going in and out of it every day. So it's sort of a way of which I'm working. We can cut the volume on the video, actually. Oh.
Which one? We don't cut it. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so you enter into the studio, and it's my sort of cave, let's say. I'm there every day. Oh no, what happened?
Come back.
Here.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe you have to move in the bar on the footer, just. You have to touch only this one.
Okay.
I hope. Try to see. Yeah. Okay. You have to control that.
That's how you control it.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's many different layers inside of the studio. I'm working in several different materials. I guess I've worked a lot with wood in the past. So how do you pause it? Sorry. No.
I can help you maybe.
Yeah, pause. So here's a good view of exactly when I enter the space, and you can see there are some works which I had done in the past and take out to have around, and ones which I'm working on currently. And I like to build everything in a way so that I can see work which I've done in the past, and then I build upon that for the next exhibition. So every time it's a kind of continuation of the process rather than doing an exhibition, finishing, and not thinking about it anymore. So I like to always have several
In that point, sorry.
several bodies of work which I'm working on constantly over many different years. So the example of the cedar sculptures, like the one which is here in the university, I've been doing these pieces for about 10 years. And yeah, they're made out of Canadian cedar wood. And this material was traditionally a material that was used by Native Americans for totems, totem poles, and for canoes, and for other sculptural objects for Native Americans. And I chose to work with it because I was also interested in this idea of creating a sort of totem or a sculpture which tells a story of its making, which totems are intended to do. So I approached them in this way to sort of deal with removing the material from the sculpture. So, for example, in like the piece which is outside, I'm removing the center of the piece to only leave the outside of it. But something which is in the foreground, maybe I'm chopping away at it in a more spiral type of way, or just coming at it from one direction. So every time it's kind of dealing with the center of the mass of the piece. And this is sorry, you can pause it. So I work on many different scales. And originally, when I started out carving wood, it was just to take anything which I had wooden in my house. Like there was a cane in the corner of my house, and I started to peel away the layers of it. And as I started to work on that process, I wanted to go bigger as a sculptor. And once I got into this studio, which I'm working in now, because it had big ceilings and it had more possibility, I increased the size or the scale of my work. So more it was moving outside of working with something that was a tool of the hand into something which was really dealing more with architecture or dealing more with the entire space. And also the physicality of making the larger works became more about me having to use more of my physicality or my body in order to make them. But I'm still also working on smaller scale things, such as the canes, which I'm working on here. So again, just removing material away from it to leave a sort of skeleton of what's underneath it. And this process of removal is somehow related for me to the first work I have ever done that I remember sculpturally was when I was a boy and I went into the forest and I just picked up a twig on the ground and I removed the bark away from it with my pocket knife. And basically I'm still working on the same thing now since, 40 years. So I like to think about everything as a continuation of this moment that I had as a boy of discovering something and dealing with it. And I think that's the most honest sculptural process that I had, because the sculpture wasn't the intention. It was just a sort of discovery of material. So normally I'm carving all of the wood, and I'm also saving everything which comes away from the piece, because it is the work in a way. So I like the idea that the object stays as this sort of skeleton, and then its sort of spirit or its something is sort of spreading out away from it. So they're completely connected in a way. And I like the idea that each small piece of something that I take away is a representation of another mark which I've made on the wood. So when it comes in an accumulation, I think, wow, it's millions and millions of action and repetitive motion, and I like the trace of that. And so I spend a lot of time archiving all of the let's say what other people might throw away after they had done a wood carving. You usually throw away the shavings, but I tend to keep them, recycle them, use them, continue to use them. So with the canes here, I had started doing canes many years ago, just out of a sort of necessity. Like I said, it was just something wooden which I had in my house. And more recently, during the lockdown, it was this point where it basically got cut off from a lot of materials. So I wasn't able to get a lot of material into the studio. I also didn't have many exhibitions to do. And I remember the process of carving canes as being something I can do by myself. I don't need an incredible amount of space, and it's something that I can maybe work on every day. So to keep myself in the studio during the lockdown, to keep on going, to keep a longer process of something that maybe I wouldn't have done without the conditions which were there. So I decided to do a large field of canes, almost like a sort of field of grass that's there.
Yes, the sensation is something very thin, and like a feel of like a strip of grass, really.
Yeah. So imagine wheat or corn or something, after it's been a little bit dried and it's falling over.
So you start from the object and you carve the object.
Sorry, we went back a little bit. But we'll get to where...
Yeah, it's arrived now.
Yeah. So continuing with this idea of grass, I have always wanted to paint, but I feel like I never have any ideas for paintings. And somehow also during this time of lockdown, I thought, oh, maybe this is my chance to try it, And of course, I have no ideas and I don't know what to do, so I approach it like a sculptor from the material sense. And so what I did was I grew linen next to my studio with the idea that I would grow the linen in order to cut it down, dry it, separate it, and then turn it into string and then weave it into a canvas that I would eventually then do the painting on. But I like this idea that it was like a sort of, the idea for the painting comes from the seed of the plant. And somehow that this long process goes into the canvas. And then I thought, my God, if I do that, I'm never going to want to paint on the canvas, So I kind of think it's a good way to leave an empty canvas, because for me it has so much more to it than something than that. So again, it comes back to this idea of my sculptures of removing something away from the end. So in this sense, I want to make a painting, but in a way, I remove the act of painting away from it, but something is still there. And yeah.
So do you make sketch for your work?
Sketches? No, never. I guess most of the time when I'm in the shower in the morning, I get ideas for sculptures which I want to do.
This is the sketch.
Yeah, that's the sketch.
But because therefore in a conceptual work, I think it's a good metaphoric images. That in a conceptual work, the sketchbook is our brain, right? It's our mind. So the first interface between you and the word is the thought.
The only time I make sketches,
Sorry.
is for exhibitions, when I have to make like a pedestal, or people want to know where kind of things will be or how I want a wall or something like that. Then I'll do sort of sketches, but my drawing skills are more like cartoon. I can only do that style of drawing.
So it's not so clear to me.
Oh, so
yeah.
this here is the next step of the linen. So first, when you grow linen, it's like a tall grass. Then you have to cut it down and you have to soak it in water for a certain period of time. And after that, you can remove the outside of the hard part of the grass, and underneath are these fibers. And this is raw linen. It comes from the flax plant. And yeah, so the next point would be with this material, then you have to spin this into a thread. And so I'm teaching myself all the processes of doing it. I know it's not going to be well executed in a way, you know, like I'm just sort of making it up.
This is an ongoing work.
It's an ongoing work.
You are working on this in this currently.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's so interesting to see the fiber. Yeah. And that's starting from the idea of painting. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So we can see here other kind of works, right?
Yeah. I mean, we can, I mean, it's basically just sort of swarming around the studio, but if you have images and stuff, we can also react like that to other pieces.
We now show the studio visit.
I
But
think
this is the sketch. This is the plastic.
Yes,
The
this is a sketch of the show in New York that will be coming up next week. So, like I was saying, a field of canes.
Okay.
And I sketched them. Also, I'm showing drawings.
And now we are going to see a kind of painting, but we don't reveal the surprise to them.
It's kind of like a painting. No, it's not.
No, the next, the red one.
Takes a while.
We will see also the next images. We
Just
will see
let
this
it go,
object.
and then we can talk about it
Yeah.
Afterwards. So again, taking more domestic objects, peeling away the layers, shrinking and expanding sizes of normal objects. So playing with different materials, different associations with those materials, different senses of scale.
This is bronze or?
It's bronze, yeah. So sometimes casting things in bronze, which were mistakes in the studio, so taking that moment, freezing it. I do a lot of bronze cast of fruit and other things which I bring back to my studio, and I eat my lunch and I leave it there, and then I think, oh, that's kind of an interesting shape, and then I take it to the foundry, cast it in bronze, paint it. So I like to have all these different layers in the studio. When people come, they're not really sure exactly what is art and what is life. And I don't really either. So it's like that. I like to build the layers in the studio almost like it's a forest to me. So I like to allow things to grow in that way. So there's many different layers. Things come up and then they disappear. They sort of decay, or they shrink, or they crumble. And so there's constantly new things coming and old things sort of dying and going away. And these drawings are also a new body of work where I'm doing them with red pen. So line by line by line, I cover the entire surface of the drawings. And here's the empty pens which I'm using. Yeah, that's the end of the video.
No, we all like very much this last part that you pass from the drawing to the process.
Yeah.
It's very impressive for someone not used to attend your studio. So Yes. It's paper or
It's paper. It's just pen on paper. Yeah.
carta, hardboard.
No. It's a drawing paper.
Carta, proprio carta, neanche cartone, proprio carta.
Un lavoro impressionante.
Sì.
Yeah, there was some time in the studio that I had to
You should have some sponsor in the factory producing.
from Bic. Yeah.
Yeah. I think no.
So that was just recent, really like this week from my studio, or last a couple weeks ago. And
Yeah, it's very recent that this video. When you have some question about, please interrupt. Everybody can interrupt for questions. Just 1 second to sum up some aspects that I'm very happy he quoted a lot of concepts we already faced in our course this year. You caught them, I'm sure. The idea of a continuous process in the studio and not so relevant. The show you have to prepare works for, but it's a sort of continuous process that continuously in the time and sometimes has been shown in public. Or then the idea of this blurred border between life and work, when someone enters the studio and doesn't recognize immediately where the works finish or start and when the life is, and many other. Also the idea of canvas, the idea of painting that began in the process of painting, like because in the course we saw that the root of all these common practice today are well depth in the 60s and 70s conceptual revolution, like process art, anti-formal minimalism. So we faced that during the course, this part. But now we see another kind of work which is strongly linked to idea of time, right?
yes.
Can you explain shortly to the audience which kind of work we are
Sure.
looking at?
I started out in New York City. I was working with choreographers. I was a dancer. And I was doing a lot of performances with choreographers, performances with theater directors. And so I started also to do my own sort of art performances, let's call them. And I started to do a series of works in the Metropolitan Museum because you can easily access the Metropolitan Museum for free. And it was a place where I felt like it could be my stage and I can do performances there, but I never really invited an audience to come and watch them because they weren't the kind of performances which I felt like you want to watch. They're more something which I did and now I can talk about afterwards. So this image is of a performance which I did where I went to the museum in the morning when it opened, and then I walked to this painting. It's Madame X by John Singer Sargent. It's one of my favorite works at the Met. And I went there and stood and looked at it for the entire day. And so it was an 8-hour performance. And yeah, it was from a series of performances which I was doing at the museum. And one of the other performance which I had done was trying to walk a marathon inside of the museum in one day. And so that was the first performance. I actually did the marathon first. I think I accomplished like four marathons in the Met over the years. So I've done it several times.
4 times, 40 kilometers inside.
Inside.
So it's possible to walk 40 kilometers in one day there?
Yes. So the marathons were about how to experience the museum and how to experience art while you're moving. And so the entire time you're walking through the architecture of the museum, I was only trying to find spaces that were big enough that I could accumulate more kilometers. And so you had to move in a certain way, and the way that you experience the art is a bit on the peripheral vision. So you're looking at things and you're trying to move around it in a different way, and you experience it in a different way. It's more about the atmosphere, it's about the spaces, it's about where people congregate and how you can go around them and this type of thing. And so while I was doing the marathons, there was only this painting would make me stop and want to look at it, because I find it very mysterious or beautiful or something about it that I really like and was attracted to. And so in this performance where the photograph is of, was sort of the opposite of the marathon. It was sort of to go to the museum and to stay in one place for the entire time rather than moving around the entire time. So, and it was an interesting experience because also one maybe isn't really used to looking at a work of art for that long. And I found out quickly that if you're at the Metropolitan Museum, if you look at a painting for longer than, I think it's 45 seconds, the alarms start to go off in the building with the security. So they start to look at you and try to figure out what you're doing. And so first there was one guard there, and then I noticed there was two guards there, and then there was three, and then, they started to surround you a little.
You had your audience for sure.
Yeah. Also with the cameras and everything.
Exactly. Also the vision.
And it's an interesting thing because it sort of turns, the act of looking at something can be potentially dangerous or potentially, something that a security issue. But the security guards actually came up to me and talked to me, and I explained what I was doing, and they thought it was cool. And they just basically asked me if I needed anything. They're like, okay, that's okay. As long as they knew what I was doing, they didn't really have any problem. And someone sort of stayed with me for the day in the room. But because this performance was part of Performa, which is this larger biennial in New York City, I think that they had made some phone calls and found out that it was part of like a larger performance biennial that was happening in New York at the same time.
Yeah, that's clear.
Yeah. So.
No, this is very interesting for many point of view, I think, also from the management of the museums and how we look at works, how we experience the space. It's full of suggestion, these two performance. So I think that there is something about we will like and we need to reflect on and to work on in the future, because it's very, very complex also in terms of contents.
Mm-hmm.
Another picture you shared with me for this talk was this one, and I think that we move again towards the object idea. That you started with the normal daily object, and I read in a couple of interviews you released that sometimes because of this kind of object you were sometimes compared to an artist working on the concept of violence because of this kind of object, the baseball bats. So of course, your answer in the interview are very clear. You work with a lot of energies in your studio, but it's something that can't be compared to the idea of violence. And I agree. I think that's this kind of picture is not so well a reference to violence, in my opinion. It's more related to space and to the subversion of our reference to the space and to architecture and with the object too, I think.
Mm-hmm. In a way, it's sort of anti-violence. It's like laying down the weapons, no?
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the baseball bat The baseball bat in Europe is seen more as an object of violence, but in America, and it is also in America, but in America it's something that it's just so common to have because I played baseball when I was a child, and it's sort of an object which is in everybody's house.
It's a familiar object.
Yeah, it's a familiar object.
But it's also a sculpture in a way.
It's also a sculpture, and it's also something that my dad always kept the baseball bat under the bed, in case, I don't know, in case somebody he came
multiple choice, multiple uses.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I always have one at my house. And that's really the reason why I started to use it. It wasn't specifically to talk about violence. But I did name this piece the Rite of Spring, which is, of course, this famous performance by, famous music by Stravinsky and performance of the ballet in Paris. At one point was quite scandalous, and it caused a sort of riot. And I was into that piece for a while when I was a dancer, and so I sort of connected it as that this sort of staging that you could have for a potentially violent act.
Okay, so this idea of stage, but in terms of set, of hanging off or setup of the sculpture, you are not allowed to walk on it.
You are.
You are.
Yeah, so the idea was that you're supposed to walk on it because the baseball bats are round.
So they are a little bit out of balance.
It doesn't, you have to walk across it. It's not like a regular floor. So it immediately brings your attention to where your feet are in the space and how you're walking. And I liked that a work of art could become physical for you. For the viewer.
So we could define this work something like in the minimal art when we studied for example Carl Andre, and he said in one of his statements, I want to pass from sculpture to structure and from structure to place. I want to create place, and I think that's pavement, floor, or better road or square are the best artworks we can do because something happened upon that. So I think that this idea that the sculpture, this is a very good example of how the sculpture is activating itself only because there is a strong interaction with the audience. Because David, I think you well focused the attention we pay to our feet and the way we walk on and in the architecture in the space. So immediately the sculpture became in a sort of way useful to make our experience of the life different, because we think about things that usually don't focus and don't pay attention on.
Yeah, it's not it takes up the entire room, so you kind of don't have a choice but to walk on it. So yeah, I think that it doesn't force you to pay attention, but it sort of puts you in the moment a little bit.
And in this case, talking about station, if there's a piece that aging, should we replace it or?
Well, this piece was in PS1 for, I think the show is almost up for even a year or something like that. So it got quite a bit of traffic. And we did sort of clean it afterwards, and it was totally fine. It wasn't actually that much damage. But of course, wood is a natural material, and it will break down over time. But if it's well conserved or kept in a good way, it won't. And so I'm not sure, what would happen to it over time. But of course, it could be replaced. It doesn't have to specifically be those bats. It's more the idea that we could, of course, do it again.
It's more about the idea of the material.
It's both, but yeah, I mean, the idea is more important for me because, I mean, you make something in the studio and then it disappears. You never have it again. The only thing that you have is is what's inside of you, the idea, and that can never go away.
But in a way, you would prefer. It's correct to say that you would prefer to keep the same original objects cleaned after the use, but you prefer to have this kind of not new material. So in an idealistic way, you would prefer to keep the same object with the sign of the time, or do you think?
I think it really would have to depend upon the context of the place where it was being shown, the scope of the show, all sorts of practical issues with logistics and this type of stuff. Can it be produced again? How much does it cost? Where would we do it? I mean, if it was my dream world, I would, have my own baseball bat factory that I'm, can just make them all the time. But of course, there's a reality to making works like that it's not easy to, there's many different levels of fundraising that you have to do, talks that you have to, you know what I mean? So it's a quite, not complicated, but it requires this kind of work.
Yeah, no, there are many.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What about this one?
So this is also continuing this idea of the stage or the floor. I made an entire, I think if you go to the next image, maybe, so this is an exhibition space, and what it is the entire surface of the gallery of the floor are made out of chalk sticks, done in a parquet pattern. And so the actual idea of this piece is that it does break and break down as the exhibition continues. And the idea for the piece actually came from an architect who was telling me about these floors in Venice, which are made out of chalk. And it was an old technique where they were crushing the chalk into the floor over a long period of time until it becomes almost like stone or concrete again. And so I liked that idea that maybe if I would do a show just conceptually over hundreds of years, maybe it would turn into one of these sort of Venetian floors. But I was quite surprised that once I did do it, there wasn't a sort of crumbling of the floor. It was more because of the way of the pattern. It sort of dispersed the weight, and you only had these cracks going. So it became more of like an acoustic experience of like, this when you have this plastic bubbles and you squeeze it, and it's like a very satisfying sort of noise. It was also sort of like that.
Oh, wow. So you didn't expect that when you...
I didn't know what to expect, I mean, you have to do something for the first time, and then when I did that piece for the first time, it's strange because you would think with the weight of people and many people and high heels and all of this that it would really sort of break down, but instead it sort of stayed together in a way. And it became more of this cracking noise thing, which I really liked also.
Very interesting, that idea that the pattern reacted in another way. Yes. I found very interesting also this one, because reading the caption, enamel on wood. So can you explain how you work and how you process this sculpture, which is also a sort of installation?
Yeah, it's a miniature door. I don't know if you can tell by the image, but it's maybe something like this big. Small. And these kind of doors, the design of the door, are from these small doors which are in my neighborhood in Berlin. And they're the entrances for the basements of the older pre-war buildings. And I liked always these they're half doors. Okay. And I always liked the scale of them and the sort of proportions of them. So I took the design from there and then I shrunk it down even further that it wouldn't be exactly that an adult human would be able to go through that. And so I created the doors for my installations as sort of they don't work, so there's nothing behind them. They're more just the idea of a space behind it. So just to give the viewer another layer into the exhibition where they think, what is the door? Where does it lead to? And what's behind it, in a way? And I liked this imaginary space which could be created in the imagination. So in a way, the door is like a front for something which is like the canvas or something, that it's a sort of empty psychological space that that
you have to discover, or in a way to
you have to imagine,
to imagine and create something. But you revealed, you shaped, you sculptured
this was fabricated by
was it casting from the model?
No, it's just made out of wood, like any door would be made.
Okay, so
it's layers of wood and then painted.
But you took from the context, or you built it?
I built it.
You built, yeah. So you construct the door again that you saw in this. But it's very interesting because this idea of out of scale door must be also switched to another realm of imagination. I think, you know, the imaginary, the dreaming, fabulistic in a way. I choose a couple of this focus because it's. I think it's interesting to see how these objects we already saw now are set in the space when you think and you conceive an installation exhibition in a space.
Want me to talk about it, or how I do it?
If you have something.
I think this installation in particular, I made everything in the space. I was there for.
You made there.
Yeah.
You worked there inside. Oh, yeah. I couldn't realize that.
Yeah. So I do all sorts of different ways. So I have my studio practice, and often I make works there and then ship them to the gallery and install them. But other times I go to the space and I make the exhibition there in the space, which is my preferred way to make an exhibition.
Yeah, so the process is clear.
Yeah, so that because a lot of times the works are installed or conceived of as a reaction to the space. So how I feel there, what will fit in this space, how do you move in the space, also coming back to this marathon idea about how does somebody move in it. And it sort of comes back to also my experience as a dancer and working with choreographers about space and how objects or people or dancers how they're put together can create a story, and how the viewer moves through a space or experiences an artwork for me is an important consideration for how the work is installed. Because I want there to be a sort of flow or a way to maybe surprise or engage them in a
Yes. Do you remember any particular sensation or reaction of you in this space, especially in this gallery? Do you remember, in case you remember something about how you decided to work in this way in this space? So something that the space suggests you for this show or not?
Not really, no. I had recently been home to my parents' house, and I was in the basement, where I used to hang out when I was a kid. And there we had a billiard table and weights and all baseball bats and all this kind of stuff down there. And I was playing around with those objects, leaning up against the wall at home. And I thought, this is what I'm going to do in Paris. The show is in Paris. Okay. And so I got the idea from the basement at my parents' house.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much. So this is quite interesting because of the object of the hammer, right? It's again idea like the bats, the baseball bats, but in a different way.
So it's a contradiction of the action of the hammer and the fragility of the handle. So obviously it sort of takes away the use of the object. Not only removing the material, but removing the intended use of the object. And in this case, I also made the scale of the hammers much bigger so that they sort of seemed like some giant would have used them or something like that. And I, in particular, put them in a smaller space to make it feel even more that way. So there's a low ceiling, small space with these big pieces inside.
Yeah, this is a sort of subversion of the images and the space, like in a sort of surrealistic way, I think. There are not a lot yet images, don't worry, but just I think 3 or 4 more.
No problem.
Like this one.
This
and
is an example, if you go back, that's an example of an exhibition which I made in the space there like that. So that was also, it was in Brazil actually, and they had ordered this wood from, it's Brazilian cedar, which I had never worked before. It's quite a bit heavier than what I was used to working on, and I almost broke my back working on this show.
Yeah, I think it was demanding, requested a lot of force.
Yeah, the effort, the physical effort of making some of the shows, because also you can't go there for like 3 months to make something. You have 10 days or something, you know, and so trying to work in this intensity.
Sort of confrontation. Here is well evident I think the old tradition of sculpture in a way, don't misunderstand it, but you know, this confrontation about man and materials in the sculpture process is something that we have been studying for decades or centuries in the art history tradition. This kind of confrontation between the strong materials and in this case you came across this, but it was totally hazard and an accident because of the materials. So it's interesting how the materials affect the sculpture, even when it's not the artist to choose that. And this is the same, right? More or less process. It's another show. But
actually, I did this one in my studio, and I brought it there and I set it up.
Okay.
So there's both ways of doing it.
I think it's evident the difference.
It is. To me, it's completely evident.
I think that would be interesting to ask here about, you know, what we were discussing before, the idea of the use of the space from the audience and the visitors. Have you never thought about sort of barriers or borders between? Do you want the words completely available and free for the audience, or sometimes it's better to also put some pedestal or, you know, plexiglass bases, or sometimes in a there is a small base in plexiglass here in Santa Maria. We would like to introduce this kind of topic in terms of also preservation. When you set a work like this with a lot of scraps and shapes, sometimes can move.
Well, first, it always depends upon the context in which the work is shown or the situation in which I'm in. Obviously, my ideal way to do it is like that picture before, that I go there and make it in the space, and that's my expression. I don't really, but of course, if something is going into a bigger museum or something like that, and there's registrars involved, and so you have to have this kind of conversations. Of course, I've had to compromise and work on things that will work for, first of all, it depends upon the safety, because some of the pieces are quite precarious in their balance. And so you don't exactly want that falling over and landing on somebody, of course. And you never know with people with their backpacks, if they turn fast and then they hit it, you know, accidents can definitely happen. And so, of course, I don't want that. It's not an intention of the work that it could fall over and hurt some, you know, like, of course not. So I've had to deal with that in many different ways. And sometimes it's a pedestal. Sometimes it's a string which comes from the ceiling and holds it at the top.
For safety.
Yeah, for safety.
So you're quite available to compromise with
Yeah.
registrar, curators, and directors.
Of
You
course.
understand
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's a collaboration in the end. I'm just an artist, you know. And in order to make an experience, it requires so many different people. But sometimes the wood chips themselves act as barrier to the work. So people, you know, the wood chips going around it, so that people don't come exactly that close physically to the piece.
Wow, but this is interesting. The idea.
The thing which is difficult from a conservation point of view is the dust that gets into the wood chips. And so I have a lot of times people asking me, it's dirty, or what can I do with it? Or, yeah, and I always think, I didn't really think this far ahead. But you can clean them. And you can also, like I said, it also depends upon the situation. I can also replenish them because I have tons.
Several times.
Yeah.
I want to ask you if it's okay for you that we remove the dust, or
Yes.
if you want to add more scrap.
Well, when you showed me the piece downstairs, and
It's mine.
yeah, I was like, wow, it looked at somehow, I was like, wow, oh my God, because I was looking at the whole atmosphere, and I was like, there's my work, you know? You showed it to me. And I did notice the first thing I was like, oh, it looks like it got a little bit dusty, the wood chips.
Later, I think I suggest we go to.
Yeah, we go check it out.
Yeah, and we will see.
We can see it. But like I said, cedar, I mean, these pieces in particular are made out of Western red cedar, and cedar is known to be resistant to insects, and it's used for architecture, so it's quite stable. But of course, wood changes color over time as the oils dry, or as things start to happen. Depends upon what kind of light it's in, what the temperature, all sorts of different things, how it's been conserved. So yeah, it's a natural material. It can crack. It can. I also have some collectors sometimes. When you switch environments with it, it starts to make noises like. It's not cracking, but it's somehow internally it's settling. And it keeps on doing that, and sometimes little pieces fall off of it because I don't know why, you know, like it, but it's comes from the forest, and yeah, I'm sure eventually it will totally disappear.
Yeah,
just as most wooden history has.
I think that's the matter of the conservation, the cleaning, the maintenance would be something that I could leave you speaking for half an hour, but maybe you could do later during the lunch. Giulia and the restaurator Lunedì had a lot of concerns about that.
Okay,
and we will see a couple of details later. I want to talk about with you. But I found absolutely interesting also this piece, because I didn't realize immediately how the scheme was made. I mean scheme because I think it's a reference that immediately come to our minds, the idea of a sort of reptile. But I don't know if it's just a suggestion or how you. I think that the nails probably is quite referencing to the idea of process, making this nail by nail, the sort of repetition, right?
Yeah. A lot of my work, so I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's a wooden piece which is covered entirely with nails. And yeah, I had started doing the nail pieces quite a while ago, and I liked that originally I wasn't covering the whole piece. I was only sort of covering little parts of pieces. And to me, it kind of felt like, what do you call that? Chainmail, you know, from like knights wear this armor.
Okay, medaglie, decorazioni.
Yeah. And so I kind of liked that association or feeling to it.
See, sort of upgrade to the sculpture.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I understand.
Exactly. But then, of course, the process of making it is completely, for me, write something I would be interested in, because I like things which are completely repetitive, and I can get inside of this sort of zone. It's very rhythmic. It's very, I know, I go to the studio, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that for 8 hours straight.
Is actually a meditation process.
I mean, a lot of people say that to me, and I don't know.
So I was not very original to say that.
You say that, but I don't know what meditation, I guess it is like a meditation.
Maybe in a way that you empty your mind, maybe from the flow. No,
it's not exactly like a sort of serene situation, though. It's more kind of like obsessive, like picking your fingernails all day or something like that. I don't know.
I understand.
It's a different neurosis or something.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, we came to an end of this part. Yes, we are perfect time to show to our students and colleagues this particular view of the show in Basilica di Santa Maria Maggiore in Bergamo. During the show, I mentioned to you All in Good Time, Chapter 3. Can you explain a little bit how you worked? I put this kind of picture. I show you this and this one.
Mm-hmm.
I think stop. Then we are here, Santa Marta. See, all this is to come to an end in this kind of sculpture that you use also in Santa Marta here. But okay, now I think it's more clear how you work, how you act in the space. But probably in this case, I think it's the first time you see. Okay, the Metropolitan Museum was another important venue, very very characteristic, and in a way also other space you work in. But in this case, we are in the classic and the canonic context of an historical place, and in Italy and Europe, we know that we have many of them, open to a contemporary intervention. So how you work in this space, how you reacted to the heritage that is on set?
The Basilica has a curator there. And I did it together with this other curator, Stefano Ramundi.
Yeah.
And I went to go visit the space, and they showed me sort of what people had done there in the past, because they had done a few projects in this space. But immediately what was cool about it is that I was assuming it was going to be a very strict situation, that with a lot of different rules, and that I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that. But in fact, it was sort of the opposite. They really they're like, you can do whatever you want here, don't worry about it. I mean, I couldn't chop up the painting there or something like that, but I had really good access to the space. There was also old materials that were still in the space from the construction of the Basilica that I could also use if I wanted.
Oh, great.
And so I was really into working with the space. I made the works in Bergamo, not in that space. They had actually given me this small space underneath the church that was with kind of bars.
Okay.
And when I was working inside of it, many tourists that were going to the Basilica saw me working there, and they thought it's like a sort of exhibition of like somebody who's wood carving or something like that. And so I was in there chopping the things, and then I would have this crowd of people watching me do it, and I kind of felt like the zoo or something like that, because there was also these bars there, and people were looking in but not talking to me and just watching, and I felt very like a gorilla, so I don't know, something like that.
Happy. I think so.
They're like, look, he's working. And
Working
so
the-
that was a bit strange. But other than that, I had a really great time doing. This is one of my favorite exhibitions that I made. Of course, because the space was so incredible. Anything that you put in there was like, it made it a beautiful situation.
I read it was this in this show that you put some object up to the stairs to allow people just to look at something that they are not normally used to look at.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Can you explain this part of this? Yeah, I found very poetic reading.
Yeah, because when I went into the space, I want to point at something, but
You can use that.
okay.
If you want to point.
So when I went into the space, the first, when it was completely empty, I noticed that there was this tiny door up here. And I thought, oh, that's like one of the tiny doors which I've made already. And I asked the curator, well, what's behind it? And he's like, actually, I don't know. We've never checked. We don't actually know. So I got this ladder, and when we opened it, it was a small staircase there, and it looked up directly at at this fresco here, which is at the top of the Duomo or the dome in the
Outside.
of the actual church. This is in the
Fantastic.
matrimonial space.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's amazing. It's a perfect framed view of
Yes.
that piece. And I thought, I want other people to have that experience. So I left the ladder there. And then I thought maybe I can add a little something of my own there. And I put these fruits there as if it was a sort of place where I was eating my lunch just to hang out and watch this painting.
So they are the true. No, they are.
They're
plastic.
fake. They're fake.
They are fake.
They're
They are
fake.
plaster. They are
Yeah.
plaster. Okay. No, but fortunately, otherwise they disappeared in a couple of days. I think. Wow. This construction. This is what you must learn to define site specific. In this case, the work was born because the artist was there, because of the artist experienced the space, find out something that before he didn't know, and neither the curator knew. And sometimes it happens also to me, to curators, when you are in your own museum, and sometimes the artist arrived and ask you something about a particular that you say, I don't know, because I never thought about it. So please, go for it and imagine something. I think we are almost... Yeah, we arrived finally to this. I chose, again, some focus, just because I'd like to stress how this work that we are here for, because all started because in Santa Marta, the collection of Giorgio Fasol and AGI Verona Association has been settled, and in this court in front of us there is this work by you. So I like the way we arrived to talk to this, seeing all the several ways you work with materials and space and time. So sometimes the work could be different, sometimes they can appear differently, or they can dialogue differently with the space. And it depends on the artist, but depends also on the curators or the gallery or the building itself. So this is the situation you are set at here. And are you satisfied about the amount of shades and the scrubs around? This is the exact portion of no, yes. I mean, seriously, you think always about the amount of, or is the exact part that you remove, or sometimes you define?
It depends, because if I'm working on many pieces at once, it just becomes like a forest, you know.
Exactly.
It's like there's layers of pieces
It's more
everywhere.
organic and fluid.
And other times I make them and it's just that one piece, and so it's exactly that which is there. That's probably, I would say, what's underneath the piece here is not quite enough in a way. It should be It's probably a little bit more than that.
This is the reason why I posed you a question, because I noticed, I had the sensation before when you talked about that, when you look at that, and so in a way I felt this, because you acted in a way, say that, okay, well, maybe you didn't expect it was so controlled and so maybe.
No, I think I didn't.
Okay.
The
But the amount is not. Okay, you meant that probably they are not enough to be the
yeah, probably
sorry.
not enough to be like exactly
No, my
what
sensation was that you found out a little bit controlled and.
Oh no, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
So.
I mean, if it was me personally, like I guess I'm the artist, but I would have the majority of the wood chips on the platform, but then I would take a few just to put around, like more casually, somewhere else or around it, so that it doesn't get too square in a way, like that it sort of can spread a little bit. And for those pieces which go away from the platform, it's like you just have to give them to the world. They're not like something that you would conserve, you just have to add them in or take them.
Okay, this is very interesting, I think, and this is also the evidence of what you mentioned before in terms of compromise with the situation in creator. So there are many layers of interpretation, of course, but this is very interesting. I think if you have any question about other kind of conservation issues.
I want to ask you if we have to restore your sculpture, would you like to be involved in restoration?
Of course.
Just in case it doesn't need, but it's an hypothetical question.
Well, it's funny because I thought I can start a business as my own restorer because many things have come back to the studio that I have to restore.
Usually it happens, yeah.
It happens quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I do it. And yeah, I always have.
Doing, but not a restorer doing for you.
Both. Yeah, I've had discussions with restorers. Actually, my gallery in New York is Peter Freeman, and his wife is a contemporary art restorer. And so she's working with the artist in the gallery for all sorts of things. She's really like, sometimes it's...
Focused.
Yeah, she's focused. And,
it's recorded, yeah. So it's okay.
But I also like to work with her because oftentimes I don't know what to do, and then she knows what to do. Yeah.
So you need to.
This
confrontation with the.
In a way, and also there's a dialogue between. Sometimes if something in something like, for example, a door or something like that gets a scratch, and then do I fix the scratch or do I completely paint the thing again?
Yeah.
And change the color, or something. And so sometimes she doesn't feel comfortable about maybe artistic decisions.
But it is fantastic.
I
found fantastic, very interesting that you think exactly as the restorer when they face an ancient fresco or an ancient sculpture. Have I to intervene partially? Have I to remake? Have I to completely cover that? So this is always the same question.
It's
art
always
is art, and perception is perception. Yeah.
And a lot of contemporary art, I mean, it needs restoration. There's a lot of materials that are maybe not tried and tested, and so there's a wide range of things, and my work is very fragile, so it's sometimes it breaks.
That is evident. One of the issues we face. Any questions from you guys? Matteo?
Yeah, of course. My question is about your practice and how you change your practice from the wood and into ceramic, bronze things. And it's clear that you work conceptually with objects, and you started from woods, with the forests in America, with the Native Americans, wood materials, and then you work with sound inside and methodologies behind. But now you work in the gallery at Palazzo, in the show, you expose these ceramics or bronze sculptures. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of paradoxical because, I mean, you work with ceramic and you fake the real element like the Clementine, right? And I love this changing in your work, I love this transition, but I'd like to ask you how this transition came about. And for example, you put this Clementine peel on just a furniture in the gallery, and how did this change come, and how you think the conceptual artist should work now in these times with all these figurative canvases, all these green monsters, NFT, digital and gaming process. So how you face this changing, and so the question of two, how you change your work from wood to sculpture, and now from sculpture to this digital changing or this new market?
I guess the works which I showed in Brescia now at Palazzo, I'd always been doing those kind of works parallel to my wooden works. And I was using, for example, fruit or other objects that might be architectural elements like radiators or doors or things that were basically from my daily life. So, and those kind of objects take much longer to make. So usually in the studio, I'm working on these more ceramic, bronze, the painting of the bronze, casting, all of this type of stuff, which requires more time and perhaps a bit of assistance. I'm working on that stuff on a more day-to-day basis. And the wooden sculptures I'm usually doing in an intense period for a short, like intensely for a short period of time, because I can't really work that way all the time. So I always have these different layers, but I guess the conceptual idea behind those kind of works was always to add in other layers into my installations. So mostly I was having these wooden totem type of things and then adding a little fruit in the corner or something like that. So it just added to sort of another layer of like, what's that fruit? And like the sort of presence of somebody had been there before. Like a viewer had sat down and ate a piece of fruit and left it, or, you know, and they're specifically completely different than the wood, you know, so it's almost like a completely different sensibility. But they share something in the sense that I'm showing the clementine, but it's really only the peel of the clementine. So again, it's removing the fruit from the peel. And I like this idea for the viewer, or for me, when I go to the foundry, I eat the fruit and I leave the thing. So it's similar with the wood, that I'm removing the material but leaving the thing. Or with the performances, it's also, if you think about it, like the performances, I'm removing the audience from the performance and making the performance. And with the sculpture and installations, it's sort of, I want to show a performance or a performative act, but I remove the performer. So what's left is the object. And so it's always this play with removing a different element from something. So yeah, to leave something for the for the imagination, a sort of negative space or something like that.
I'm interested in the fact you work in this period with all these paradox inside. Art is a paradox right now. There is work in Ukraine, and we make memes every day about this. And I think in your work is, in a kind of way, you put inside this humor. I mean,
yeah, so I don't know. It's kind of art funny, you know. It's not exactly like comedy, but I guess you can sort of smile a little bit at it, you know. It's a small joke or something like that. And it's absolutely intended to be paradoxical, and that's what I want, or confusing, or just a question mark, or maybe an exclamation point on top of something, just something to give more layer, more meaning, more questions, more holes in the exhibition. I don't like when exhibitions are too tight, in a way that you can explain every single element of everything. I like when you can experience something and have a lot of questions about, like, what was that, or what's that? Yeah, and I feel like that is, to me, what's interesting, and how I like to approach it. The second question was about the sort of digital revolution and, you know, everything which is going on with that. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of want to go against something inside me. I don't know if it's like an old punk attitude or something. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't like that kind of.
I like the punk attitude.
And so that's why those new drawings which I did, I thought, oh, maybe I can do you know, of course, I'm like, maybe I do NFTs now or whatever, but I have no idea about any of that stuff. You tried to explain it to me, I'm like, nothing.
No, I think that NFT, someone else will make an NFT. So the question could be, what you would do if you see an NFT of your work? So
I don't know. I don't even know how do you look at an NFT? What is it?
It's a certification of property.
Yeah, people try to explain to me. I don't get it.
No, but I'm not that kind of people, because I'm really not into it. But
yeah,
I appreciate the question.
But I just wanted to work anyways with a pen and paper. I thought, this is it. Like, you don't need all of this other stuff. You just need a pen and a paper, and maybe not even that. I just need myself to stand there and look at a painting. And, you know, so I think, for me, I try to reduce all the time, the reduction or the reducing the thing.
Yeah, my question was not about NFTs particularly.
Oh, sorry.
No, it was clear.
Just the changing the scan right now with our system, market.
Yeah, I mean, it's always changing. That's the thing. It's always going to change, I think. And I think as an artist, you just have to keep on going, keep on doing your work, you know?
Yeah, because I mean, there are a lot of paintings right now, figurative paintings, and I saw in fairs or sometimes in museums to galleries, they have to show this kind of digital things.
Yeah.
And it's interesting now how conceptual artists should work in this kind of situation. I was just interested in your practice.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I think that some artists adapt and change and are able to dip their feet in all sorts of different things, but I don't know, sometimes I think it can feel a bit not genuine, this switch. And for me, I just decided that I just want to make my work honestly for me and keep on going. I know that it's going to go out of fashion at one point, you know, like, and maybe it'll come back. I don't know. There's so many different elements to it. And I think the important thing is to just keep on going to the studio every day. And even if I don't have an idea, I'm doing something. I'm there. I'm present. Yeah. to know.
I think it's clear.
Yeah.
Thank you both, but especially thank you for what you said before was extremely clear statement of your poetic. Any other questions before to close? Yeah, please.
My question is about your history as an artist, so your formation. And before you started Stravinsky from Italy for the Rite of Spring, and really out of curiosity, how much the dance world and your past dancer influenced your present work, and leaving aside the art performances, so the work in the museum that requires some movements, possible movements, so the connection with the dance world is evident. But I was thinking more about the sculpture, and if it's something that was a part of your artistic process in your life, or it's something completely different that has no more connection with it.
Well, I make work about my experience. I can only make work from my own experience, and that is part of my experience. So I think my experience as a dancer really opened my work to sculpture. Because before I was a dancer, I went to art school a little bit. I was trying to make art, but I was making more, not really sculpture, more kind of archives of different collections of things and more really conceptual work in that way. And I was going out at night and partying and dancing, and through that sort of debauchery, I met these choreographers who liked my energy somehow, and they invited me to be in their works. And I had never danced before. I have no dance background besides going to the bar and dancing like that. And so this intense experience that I had for 3 years, I worked with Maria Hasabi, who's a quite well-known choreographer within the art world. She was in the last Documenta, and she had a sort of way of choreographing where I was staying in one position for a long period of time. And I felt like a sculpture. And so I sort of, when I came back to the studio after my experience of dancing, my entire relationship with objects and space changed. And so I was really thinking about, I wanted to get into choreography more because I was interested in that after my experience of dancing. But I didn't have any ideas, so I was really sort of approaching my sculptures kind of like a performance, or like I wanted to stage it to be on a stage rather to be in a gallery in a way. So those are my initial ideas about sculpture. It came directly from my experience in dance. But I didn't train as a dancer from when I was young. And I also didn't train as an artist when I was a child. I was never into art. I was more into sports. I did that kind of stuff. But I was always into collecting objects, and I guess I was like whittling a little bit with my knife, but I never considered that. I wasn't like one of those kids who was drawing all the time and going to art camp or whatever. So I was more coming from a different way. My family also, they don't really know what art is. They know what art is, but they don't know, they didn't really know contemporary art or even modern art or anything. Their idea of art is quite different. Yeah. So, that's my background. But you were talking about before, you wanted to bring up where I had trained as an artist? Or?
I would like to thank you because you posed the question I forgot to pose to David. That was about but you already answered. So
okay,
you had this background because when you search about an artist and you check the sources online, you can find a lot of interviews, or hopefully a lot of interviews or articles or reviews. And a critic says, and in many cases he has this short video limited to born in Rochester in '79, moved to Berlin in 2008. So I asked before this talk, what happened in your life, no life, but your background, where you trained. So you answered about the choreography training and also the dance. It's very important. Just the question, why you decided to move from New York City, the very capital one of the capital of art, contemporary art, to Berlin, another very interesting city. But in 2008, the year of the global financial crisis, you moved to Berlin.
Yeah, it was a bit of many different reasons, but the most I can say honestly is I met a girl in Berlin, and I went there for her, really. But it was a good moment for me to leave New York and go to Berlin. Because, in 2008, I had just started my art career and just started to make a little bit of money, but not enough to live in New York City as an artist. And that in 2008, Berlin was much cheaper than New York. And when I went to Berlin, I went to sort of check it out for a few months. And immediately when I got there, I had a nice apartment, a big studio. I had projects in Europe, around in Europe. And it just seemed like I sort of landed into this, like, okay, now I'm a professional artist, like living in Berlin with my studio in my house. It's just something that was not possible for me in New York for many years. So I never had a studio before. I mean, when I lived in New York, really, there were many years I didn't have any exhibitions or project. You know what I mean? I just worked in restaurants. I was a cook. Part of my education, I went to barber school. I cut hair. I cook. I was working as a janitor, a cleaner. Those were my.
It's in our city, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And I wanted to go to art school in New York, but I couldn't afford it. And so I rather just hung out with artists and worked other jobs. When I moved to Berlin, I didn't have to do any of that. I could just be an artist and have a girlfriend. And everything worked.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Please.
I have a question
Sure.
about background. Talking about the kind of sculptures that you did, and the first time I saw your work of art was 2019, and that was a really hard year for me, and I felt like sort of empathy because it was empty. So, and that's what I felt myself that year. And I wanted to ask you if that's if your background reflects. Your work of art reflects something that felt like made you feel like that, and because I saw this passage between showing the shape and showing the emptiness. And I wanted to ask you if there was something that made you, what made you go from shaping the object and showing the empty.
That's a good question.
Good students. I opened the door, but not
Sure.
to make you run away. Just to change. Maybe we make a little bit.
I think that this emptiness is sort of, it's obviously emotional or something inside of me, and I don't know, like I was saying before, that when I discovered this twig in the forest and I removed the thing, it also has something really sentimental to me to work with wood, and do it, and there's something that I can't really explain, that because I think that you can't always exactly explain your emotions, you know, or your feelings or something, because it's something that you feel. So it's not something that you conceptualize. I don't know. And so yeah, I think that there's definitely, when I had started to make the sculptures, for me, the whole story was the emptiness and this sort of disbursement of this material. I don't know, it's something, I don't know how to explain. Yeah.
Prego.
I have a question that fits into the context of your performance in the Metropolitan. So, which and how is your relation with the art of the past, especially modern art?
I love the Metropolitan Museum in New York because when I first moved to New York, I liked this idea that you could go to the Met and not pay to get in. And I just liked to hang out there because I thought this place is so cool. Like, and it's free, and it's always interesting. I can always find something new there. And I love historical objects because, like I was saying, I didn't really come from a art background, but my parents were antique collectors. Not art, but more like antique objects, little lamps and all this type of stuff. And so I've always been into looking at different collections of things. And yeah, the Met has that. And so also with the history of art, I did go to kind of art school in Florence when I was 19 years old. And obviously in Florence, it's very connected with its history. And so my initial art classes, it was when I was really young, some of the first art classes I took were in Florence. And so I, of course, had this sort of connection with that. And so now it's sort of remained in my work. But more in a sort of conceptual way, I'm working, or more contemporary or modern art way. Looking at a lot of arte povera in terms of Italian, but also a lot of American minimalism. So Carl Andre, as you were saying before, was a huge inspiration for me, and in a way I was always kind of trying to deconstruct a little bit what he was doing or add to it, or like the next thing. And so I was thinking about that quite a bit. I mean, living in New York City, you have such access to constant contemporary art on view all the time. I saw a lot of shows. I worked as an art installer in a place, and I feel like some of the installations which I installed really inspired me in terms of like now what I'm doing and how I deal with installation, practical things, how I'm working. Yeah. So, and somewhere along the line, I gathered up a pretty good archive of art history, and I have a lot of reference points that I can turn to, both from ancient art and going all the way to contemporary art.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Un'altra?
I wanted to focus not on the creation or the process of creation of your works of art, but on the existence of the works itself and the relation with the public. How does the connection with the public affect your works of art, if it does, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, I think that I'm not making the art and then hiding it under my bed, It's meant to be seen in a way and experienced. and I'm very aware of that, and it's important to me. But at the same time, I kind of want to have also a distance from it, because I want people to have their own experience of the work and their own conclusions or ideas and connections, or their ability to what's their empty space and what do they associate that with. So I never wanted to really control the viewer in that way, that everything has a specific meaning or reference point. I want it to be open enough that it could have a million different reference points and ways that you can enter it and explain it, or experience it. And so, yeah, in a way, I'm my own public, you know, and I always try to work that way. Like I'm also a viewer of my own work, and so, yeah, I want to make it interesting for me to look at it, and so maybe it could also be interesting for someone else to look at. But I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you, David. Thank you, David, to be so open to discussion. Is a rare quality, and I appreciated a lot your coherency about your work and your poetic. And I'm particularly surprised and touched by, imagine, the flow of things that an artist already always see, experience in terms of art exhibition, art world without art, all the inputs, and to find this way, genuinity, you mentioned the genuinity, I mean, coherent in this way. I really appreciate it, and I found this conversation so rich in terms of suggestions and reflection for a multiplicity of issues that we face when we study contemporary art. So in all the arts, from dance to literature, poetry, and also our way to live this world. So thank you again, thank you very much. Thank you, grazie a tutti quanti voi per questo bel dibattito. Se non ci sono altre domande, if you have no any more questions, we can finish. Grazie David.
So just want to say thank you, everyone, for listening, and thank you, Luca, for the invitation. And it was a pleasure to be here, and a pleasure to see my work in the...
Now we can go to see the work, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you also, Giulia. It was very important and interesting for all the matters. Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you.